Hi, welcome back to Wayfinder. I'm inside today for another gear video. Today's video I'm going to talk about boots. I'll go over the anatomy of a hiking boot, and then I'll have a look at a few different types of boots that I've personally owned and used quite extensively, and then I'll give you some advice on how to find the correct boot for your intended purposes. Alright, let's get after it. Starting off with the anatomy of a boot. This whole body of the boot here is called the upper and incorporates the collar and heel cup or counter. And this is a rigid formed section, and it's very important for correct fit and comfort of a boot. Tongue, also very important for the comfort of a boot. Eyelets, through which the laces run. Toe cup. This is also a rigid area of the boot, and it's important to keep the shape of the boot at the front so it doesn't squash down on top of your toes or the rest of your foot. Toe guard, which is an extrusion from the outsole. The outsole is classically what we think of as the grip of the boot. So it has these lugs, it's hard wearing rubber, and this is a Vibram outsole, which is the industry standard for hiking boots. Now, sandwiched in between the outsole and the insole of the boot is what's called the midsole, which is a slightly softer, foamier type of material. Now, I've got this cutaway boot here where you can see the midsole is a sandwich between the outsole and the insole. Now, another feature of hiking boots is this white section here, which is called the shank. Now, shank is what provides a stiffness and form to the boot, and different boots, depending on their intended purposes, will have maybe a partial shank or a full-length shank like this boot, and they'll be varying thicknesses and stiffnesses depending on what exactly the boot has been designed to do. Also, internal to the boot, you can see this boot has a lining. Now, every boot has some sort of lining. It just helps to protect your feet from seams, stitching seams and other parts of the boot that might irritate the skin. And this boot here, it's also got a Gore-Tex membrane lining, which essentially makes the boot waterproof, as it'll pass water vapor one way but resist the ingress of water another way. This leads me straight into my first boot. Now, this boot, the construction of the upper is a mix of leather and synthetic, as you can see. This is a Gore-Tex lined boot. Now, Gore-Tex lining has pros and cons to it. The way a Gore-Tex membrane works is it'll pass water vapor one way but won't allow water vapor or liquids to pass in the other way. It works best if there's a large temperature differential between one side of the membrane and the other. Specifically, it should be warm on the inside and cold on the outside for the membrane to work at its best. And what happens then is as your feet start to sweat and you're releasing water vapor, that vapor passes through the membrane really quickly and easily and out and dissipates, and your feet stay nice and dry and comfortable. However, in hotter climates, what you'll find is the membrane doesn't work as rapidly. Also, if you've got really sweaty feet, you can actually overload the ability of the membrane to pass vapor. Now, as soon as that vapor builds up enough that it forms droplets, those droplets are too large to pass through the membrane, and what you find is you get water basically trapped inside of that membrane. In my experience with Gore-Tex boots, living in Australia and generally in hotter climates, that's what I found happens to me quite a lot. So for me, I generally find Gore-Tex doesn't work fantastic unless I know it's going to be very cold where I'm going. Anyway, moving on. This boot has a partial rand, as you can see. It's quite flexible, so I imagine it probably only has a partial shank in it. Now, this has pros and cons as well. One pro about this is it allows your foot to move a little more naturally, which is a bit more comfortable for just everyday use. However, if you're carrying heavy loads, and particularly on steep or rough terrain, it can lead to foot fatigue at the end of the day. So the next boot here, it's just a slight step up in terms of its stiffness, okay? But otherwise its construction is virtually identical to the previous boot. It has a leather and synthetic upper. It only has partial rand. It's also Gore-Tex lined with all the pros and cons that go along with that. And this boot has a Vibram sole, which, like I said, is the industry standard for soles for hiking boots. A boot like this is fantastic. These boots, they're really easy to fit Their out-of-the-box comfort is great, usable for almost any hiking purpose. So for an all-round hiking boot, you just can't go past something like this. For a slightly more serious boot, there is this. It's heavier, it's stiffer, but also it's got a full leather upper, okay, and a full rand. Now a rand like this will provide significant abrasion and wear resistance for the boot, just giving you a bit of a longer lasting boot. Okay. Also, this particular boot, it doesn't have a Gore-Tex lining. Now, for me, I really like that, as I said, I've got quite sweaty feet. Now, it's still waterproof because the leather's waterproof, but the leather will actually absorb some moisture from inside and allow that to pass through the leather and dissipate, keeping your feet relatively dry and comfortable. So for me, this is an absolutely fantastic boot. One kind of a heavier leather boot like this is there's a significant break-in period, and if the fit is not correct, these things will destroy your feet. However, you get the right fit and go through a bit of a break-in process with these boots, and comfort is unrivaled. Okay, if you're serious about hiking, want to hike a lot, I couldn't recommend a boot like this highly enough. Finally, this boot is a mountaineering boot. It's not really meant for anything else. Has these clips front and rear, which are for clipping on crampons. Okay, it's extremely rigid. You can't bend it at all, which is a must for if you're going to ice climb or crampon. You can't afford to have any flex, otherwise your feet have to work so hard, your feet muscles have to work so hard that you'll just tire out in no time whatsoever. Now this boot has a full leather upper like the previous boot, but it's also Gore-Tex lined. But this works fantastic when you're working on a glacier or above the snow line at high altitude, because it's so cold there that any water vapor that comes off your foot dissipates immediately through the membrane, keeping your foot nice and dry. This boot, hopeless if you just want to do your average bushwalking. It's just too stiff. It feels really wonky and weird. But for what it's designed for, a boot like this is a must-have. You just couldn't mountaineer in a boot like this with all the flex. So for what it's made for, it's a must-have, but for other purposes, not so good. Understanding the design, features and construction of different boots is important, but you also have to factor in your personal physiology. So your foot shape and size, your ankle strength and balance, your general conditioning to wearing a pack and moving around with boots on. For example, I don't like Gore-Tex boots because I have sweaty feet, so I'll generally avoid Gore-Tex boots unless it's for winter or mountain use. But another thing is that I do tend to err towards heavier boots nowadays because I like this support underfoot. I'm not carrying a pack all day, every day like I used to, and I like a bit of ankle support now too. But in the past, I would have used a shoe like this for multi-day trips, okay? Really flexible, no foot support, but really comfortable, low cut, light, keep my feet nice and cool. So you're going to have to take those things into account for yourself with your boot selection, and whether you want to err towards a heavier boot or you're happy to go towards something lighter, and what exactly you want out of it and what your personal confidence and strengths allow you to accommodate for. A lot of boots are better for day walks, flatter terrain, really well established tracks, and if you want to clock up a lot of Ks, something like this is good, okay? For more serious hiking, especially if the terrain is steep or mountainous, think Tasmania or New Zealand, then I really would advise you to at least go and look at something like this. Okay, it's just got that added bit of stiffness, more ankle support. If you're going to only do 1 or 2 hikes a year, or maybe that just one trip of a lifetime, then a boot like this is ideal. It's out of the box comfort is really good. If you get the correct fit in store, you can almost walk out the store and straight onto a trail with it. Okay, and they'll last a really long time and will suit you for almost any purpose you want to go for. But if you're serious about hiking, you hike a lot or want to hike a lot and are prepared to spend the time with a bit of a break-in period, then a boot like this is fantastic. The comfort and longevity you get out of a full leather boot like this once it's broken in is unrivaled. They are heavier, so at the end of the day you can get a bit of leg fatigue just from having that heavier boot on the end of your leg. So it's a bit of a 50-50 between these two in my mind. Up to you. Like I said, I don't really like a Gore-Tex lining, so it's this boot for me. Now, of course, if you're going to be doing glacier travel or high altitude work or ice climbing or something like that, then a mountaineering boot is a must. And something like this is fantastic, comfortable, fit for purpose. Now, first and foremost, when it comes to just some generic boot fitting advice, unless you have used that exact brand and model before, you need to go into a store to get fitted. Okay. All outdoor stores will have staff who know how to fit a boot properly. There's a couple of things to consider when fitting a boot. One, ensure that you wear the same socks as you're going to hike in, so you get the correct fit in that regard. And you'll probably find you need to get a boot about one size up on your normal street shoes. The reason for this is, one, your feet will swell up as you hike, so you need that extra room. Two, you need a definite toe gap in the front of a boot for when you're walking. As you're going downhill, the last thing you want is your toes to be banging into the front of the boot. This will give you black and blue toenails and is extremely painful after a day or so. However, you also need, once the boot's laced, it needs to hold your heel in place so it doesn't move up and down, so you don't get those trek ending blisters. So fitting a boot correctly can be a bit of a journey, so don't be scared to try on a few different boots. Shop around, don't just go for the first pair of boots that you try on. A hiking boot, a good hiking boot, it's a significant investment in your foot and your comfort, and having the wrong fitting boots will definitely ruin a trip very quickly. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video and got something out of it. If you did like the video, please hit the like button. If you didn't like the video, then feel free to hit the dislike button twice. If you like this channel, please subscribe, and if you've got any comments or questions, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Also, one last thing, I'm always trying to think of ideas to make videos, so if there's something you'd love to know that's gear, navigation, field skills related, etc., let me know. If it's a topic that I know something about, I'll do a video and I'll give you a shout out. All right, whatever it is that you're into, get after it.